Time to say a very, very good morning to Mr. Neil Oliver. Neil, how are you doing?
Hello, Mike. I'm hanging on in there, thanks. How are you?
I'm very well indeed. I want to start with an email I've got today from a guy who runs a scaffolding company in London. And he says this: me and my wife run our middle-sized scaffolding company. It is very heart-wrenching at the moment regarding recruitment. We often have a labourer's advert running in 2 major online recruitment websites, as the job is very tough. We get a high turnover, and we have seen some disturbing changes. We have seen a lot of people applying for the role from a diverse background and from people not even in the building game, let alone scaffolding. We're seeing teachers, chefs, coaches, sailors, hairdressers. The list is diverse and vast. There's a growing silent storm, and no one is talking about it apart from you guys. Thank you for your positivity whilst raising issues that many people are facing. And it's from Jonathan Waller, Managing Director of Alexander Scaffold Limited. And I think that tells you an awful lot about what's going on, Neil, out there, that people are not only being forced out of their jobs, but they're having to look for jobs in places where they never thought they would be.
Yes, I think that's illustrative on a number of levels. I mean, for one thing, to look on the bright side, it does show how stubbornly determined people remain. You know, that people from a diverse background, teachers, whatever, are thinking, right, I'm going to have a goal.
Yeah.
I'm going to make a living, and I'm prepared to change direction. And in this instance, they're applying for something that they obviously think, maybe they think that that the construction industry will have to go on come hell or high water, and if they can get in amongst it, there's an opportunity there. So I suppose that's a positive, because it shows how indomitable some people are. But if so many people are in so many professions are seeing no future in the career that they've trained for and that they've worked in previously, then that's a very worrying angle. And that's people who have skills, who've already acquired professions and know the way that the world of work operates. But recently, we're listening to my teenage daughter in particular. She's 17, and obviously she's talking to lots of people her own age, particularly girls. And the sentence that's coming back all the time from them, what they're saying to each other and what they're saying to their parents, is, "What's the point?"
Yeah.
Now, that is desperate, because I'm talking about, ordinary, normal people in the best sense of both words. People who 12 months ago who work hard at school, who are motivated or were motivated, who were talking excitedly about university, about jobs, about flats, about travel. And now, not a year into that, after those sort of sentiments, they're saying, "What's the point?"
Yeah.
Now that means that without some kind of intervention, very powerful intervention from the authorities, the generation coming up who haven't worked yet and don't have anything to fall back on, have internalized the idea that none of this is going away. They don't think, my daughter doesn't think, her friends don't think that lockdown is ever going to stop.
Yeah.
They can see that it might break for a few weeks or for a few months, but they've internalized the idea that lockdown is now a fact of life. And so when it comes to thinking about going to uni, they're thinking, well, what's the point? Yeah. We'll get locked down, we'll get trapped in our halls of residence, or we'll be at home. They're thinking about, look where they would have looked forward to travelling the world, or at least going abroad. They're saying, well, what's the point?
Yeah.
Because of lockdown. And that's insidious. That's a corrosive frame of mind that has entered people. Now, I know some of these people, some of these girls, and they were just completely positive, excited about the potential of the future. And now to listen to them saying what's the point. Furthermore, I mean, my daughter knows of girls who've been having conversations. Actually, we're hearing it from the parents. And the parents, glassy-eyed with worry, are saying that for the first time they've actually had conversations about suicidal thoughts with teenage girls who, up until relatively recently, were just looking forward to life.
Yeah.
Now, that is a matter that has got to be addressed.
It really does, and it's something that I fear the government is kind of blissfully unaware of. I don't think that they are deliberately unaware of it. I just think they don't get it. I was talking to somebody the other day who is in and out of Downing Street from time to time, who said basically that they don't really seem to have a firm grip on anything right now. They're not really, giving the impression that they are running a very tight ship and they know precisely where it's going. They're sort of sitting there waiting for something to happen and for the next wave to buffet them left or right. or backwards. They're not really certain of where they're even going. So I don't think they're even taking any of that sort of stuff into account.
No, I've been very dismayed by the popularising of this expression, COVID denier.
Yes.
Because I think whoever coined that expression was deliberately trying to establish a link in the minds of people between those who deny the seriousness of COVID and those who deny the Holocaust of the 20th century.
Yeah.
And to invite people to bracket those two things together, I think is very, very wrong and pernicious. But I do think that there is a denial there, and the denial is there in the scientists, and it's there in government, that they are in a state of denial about the long-term reality of the situation that their measures have created.
Yeah.
They're not facing up in any meaningful sense to you talk about long COVID, the consequences economically and for people's mental health and aspiration, every other metric you could think of, is going to be the stuff of years. You know, Solzhenitsyn said, if you're cold, don't expect any sympathy from someone who's warm. And that is the fundamental problem. The people, as we've said before, who are coming up with and applying these restrictions and regulations are not really affected by them,
right? Because
their jobs become ever more secure, their salaries go into their account every month, their pensions are topped up, they're busy, they're engaged with a project that, you know, that goes on and on and on. And because they are warm in that Solzhenitsyn sense, they simply cannot empathise with those who have been broken by it. Now, thank goodness, I mean, I've been listening to Julia Hartley-Brewer and yourself speaking to those, you know, people are dotted around the country in all sorts of circumstances who are being broken or who are broken by the lockdown restrictions. And thank goodness there's someone giving voice to that, because sooner or later the powers that be are going to have to face up to the reality of the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there are millions of them. You know, we were talking the other day on Twitter. I was having various conversations with people about, you know, the 4 million people who have now been vaccinated. And I said there's at least another 4 million, possibly 8 million, possibly 12 million, as far as I know, people who are being adversely affected by this terrible situation. And, you know, nobody's blaming the government for it, but they can't keep going without taking account of this kind of misery that is befalling people. I mean, I have a friend who has a friend whose 14-year-old tried to kill himself just before Christmas, you know, for the very same reason, you know, that they just don't see a future. And we saw the Prince's Trust story that came out yesterday, in which it was said that, you know, 1 in 4 children between the ages of 16 and 25, they're not really children, young adults, feels like there's no way out of it.
Yeah, I think that sentence that my daughter's friends are that's now become a mantra, this "what's the point?"
Yeah.
I think the government and everyone else has to waken up to and really start paying attention to that state of mind, because it is within the teenage population and the younger generation, but it's everywhere. Because, I mean, I think you'd be willfully naive to think that lockdown, having been established as a technique that clearly many people are prepared to put up with, there's the furlough and all the rest of it that's functioning to make people tolerant of lockdown. I think you'd be willfully naive if you thought that technique, that option is going to go away. Anytime there's a virus, and there will be more viruses, anytime there's an outbreak of this, that, or the next contagion, lockdown will be in the arsenal. Now, if you're someone who previously would have thought, I'm going to open that restaurant, or I'm going to open that barber shop, or I'm going to open that garage, and I'm going to employ people, and I'm going to, we're going to have a future that we're in control of, we'll be self-employed and all the rest of it. For so many people now, no sooner will that thought appear in their minds, but they will think, but what's the point? Because you would make all the investment, you would make all the effort, you'd employ people, and then all of a sudden, 6 months of lockdown. Your staff would be away, your premises would be closed. What's the point? Now, we know that the public sector, everything that we depend upon, the NHS, education, people picking up the bins, all of it depends on the private sector that creates the money that can be taxed, that the Treasury can then use in a real sense to fund everything else. And if the only people who are in any way inclined to go to work are in the public sector, then then there will not be the new money. You know, we only recently paid off the debt for the Second World War.
Right.
You know, we've been paying as taxpayers for the Second World War until the last couple of years before we finally got that off the books. And now we've got 100 years of debt for COVID. And the only way, you know, it's all very well to have the pretend money that they create by changing the numbers on computer screens in banks that that they can dole out in the short term. But in order to get the real money that they can tax, that will actually begin to eat into that debt that's going to be glowing red hot for a century or more, is from the private sector. And that ennui has set in the private sector, I would have thought, where so many people who previously would have embarked upon a self-employed business are saying to themselves and to their husbands and wives, what's the point?
Yes. I've been staggered, actually, by the resilience, in a way, of so many of the businesses that are still continuing to go on and who are trying in many ways to kind of, to be more agile about trying to make money in a different way. A lot of restaurant businesses doing takeaways, that kind of thing. But, they've just been bashed from pillar to post. And I don't think that if they're now talking very casually this morning about April the 2nd. I mean, that's 72 more days of this. Without schooling, without your kids really going anywhere out the door, you can't really do anything. I mean, all you can do really is take them for a walk in the park, right?
I'll be honest with you, Mike, and this is just my opinion. I don't expect my kids to go to school this term,
right.
This year. Once we get to this, what would have been the summer holidays, and then come August and whatever, that's another year. But I don't, in all honesty, expect any of my kids to go to school this year. So that's right up into June and July.
Yeah. Right.
I'm honest, and beyond. I don't see any likelihood of that situation changing unless there's a massive change of direction from the people at the top. To me, the government and the scientists who they prefer to take advice from, they haven't got the wit and the wisdom to accept that what they've been doing hasn't been right. The lockdown strategy hasn't worked, but they will not back away from it. I mean, all the best scientists throughout history, the Einsteins, the James Clerk Maxwells, they were famous for their willingness, almost their enthusiasm to talk about their mistakes.
Yeah.
When Einstein would take a new job somewhere, amongst the basic things that he would ask for, he always wanted a great big waste paper bin into which he could throw all of his mistakes.
Right.
I wear a suit of armour made only of my mistakes. Having taken the wrong path and then having the wit and the wisdom and the maturity to change direction in order to rectify your mistake is what being a functioning member of society is all about. But at the moment, I see that the government and the scientists that are advising them are just bloody-mindedly persevering with a set of regulations and a set of restrictions that haven't done what they said they could do. And I think another element of the denial is that they thought they could eradicate COVID-19. And they still talk sometimes about zero COVID.
Yeah, they do. This very morning we heard it from the Tory MP we were talking to. And he, fortunately, is more like you and I, doesn't think that is an achievable aim.
Of course it's not an achievable aim. It's ridiculous. It's up there with, when did we start imagining that we could get reduce a new virus to zero? And when did the lawmakers think that they could get 100% compliance on any law? It just doesn't happen. We live in an imperfect world, and the dangerous denial is the fact that COVID is here to stay, and it's going to mutate because viruses mutate. And if all the government and the scientists can think to do is whenever they feel the necessity so to do, to lock down the country for months on end, then you're going to perpetuate this attitude, this burgeoning attitude of what's the point.
Yes.
And I agree with you. There are so many people out there who have doggedly kept themselves in the game. We're surrounded by businesses that have been as flexible as any yogi, bending over backwards to find new ways to turn an honest coin. And every time they look as if they've established a path that's going to get them out of it, that avenue is blocked again. And these are people who already had established businesses.
Yes.
The other aspect that I'm talking about are the people coming up who are going to embark on first jobs, who would have opened first businesses. Now, they don't have any kind of reservoir of experience to fall back upon. They don't have a business that, however battered it might be now, the foundations of it are or were still there.
Right.
It's the people. it's my children coming through into a world hobbled by the concept of lockdown that I'm worried about, because
Yes.
I don't think lockdown's going anywhere. In the same way that I don't think the virus is going anywhere.
Right. And also the logic of what you might have regarded as science in the past seems to have been turned on its head, because what we have is a collection of scientists who don't know the answers to an awful lot of the questions that we put to them about the virus. I mean, I have a doctor on pretty much every day of the week on this show. And when you say to them, does the vaccine work on every single variant of the coronavirus, they're not sure. If you are detecting a virus in Brazil and one in Kent and one in South Africa that are all different from the one that was already here, will there be more? We don't know. The only thing they can be sure about is that the lockdown damages people and damages mental health and damages economies and damages lives, but they don't seem to care about that part of the fact, where they only really care about the bit that they don't know about.
Well, it's just that analogy again about, if you're warm, you can't empathise with somebody who's cold. You can, if you're in the lifeboat, you don't really listen to the complaints of the people that are thrashing about in the water.
Right.
The people that are making that are choreographing everything that we're doing at the moment are not affected by the consequences, or not anywhere near the kind of level of effect and consequence that other people out there are suffering. And if you turn, I'm not suggesting you should, but if you stopped furlough tomorrow, the situation would turn on would turn 180 degrees. For as long as a large part of the population are content that they can keep going, that they can survive, then they will continue to turn a blind eye and a deaf ear to those that can't.
Yes.
But then that's what furlough and lockdown are all about. It's about keeping a demoralised, population indoors, obeying the regulations as far as possible. While government and scientists, continue to prosecute a war that is only attritional.
And this is the thing, I started the show this morning by saying there is a kind of, I don't want to use the word normality because it's not what I want to say, but there is a kind of acceptance now of the way things are. People wake up in the morning, they do whatever they were doing yesterday. If it means going to the supermarket, if it means that they can work because they drive a van, or if it means that they can go to a job of work, or if it means that they go into their living room and work from home, people have kind of accepted their lot, it seems to me, because they can see now that it's going to be like this for a while.
We were out, my family, we were out walking the dog, which is our outside exercise. And my wife said, "Hands up, who wants to go to Nando's and then go to the cinema?" And and I mean, what a modest ambition that was for a Saturday afternoon, to go and eat some chicken and then go and see a Marvel, an Avengers movie at the cinema.
Yeah.
And we all just, the thought of that, it was like somebody had dangled, a lottery win in front of them. It was Nando's cinema. You think, well, oh, we'll never do that again. Those days are behind.
I know, and it is strange, isn't it, how your mind works? I mean, you would have heard, I'm sure, Julia this morning talking to the woman who just before I came on, talking about her mother who was terrified of going out to the supermarket because she thought she might be breaking the law. And I think, you and I, Neil, probably take it as read that we are contrarians. We're not going to do what we're told by anybody in any situation. But an awful lot of people are frightened to break the law.
Yeah, the generation above, my in-laws and my parents. What is almost surreal is the way that there's an extent to which they're not worried about. They are worried about the virus. I mean, everyone's aware of the virus, but what they're really worried about is getting into trouble.
Yeah.
My mum-in-law, it isn't her uppermost concern is not that if she goes out she might catch COVID-19 and get ill and possibly die. Right. Worry is that she breaks the law, or that she gets us into trouble by inadvertently turning up at our door and or whatever. That's her concern. She's not worried about getting ill, although she knows that that's a possibility. But far closer to the forefront of her concerns is just the fact that she might break the law. It's becoming Kafkaesque.
I know. And it really is not surprising, but given how much of it has been going on and how many people have said the things that they've said. I mean, we've got adverts running on our own station that say, if you bend the rules, people will die. I find that quite extraordinary.
Yes, but for me, as a parent, I mean, I'm 53. I've weighed up the risks that my demographic put me in, and that's fine by me. I'm not bothered. But my children, because I see what's being laid now is not something short term. We're no longer dealing with an emergency. I hate using the expression, but a new normal has been established, and it's made of fear. It's made of a necessity to accept that we're never going to, you know, get beyond this virus and lockdown. And my children, teenagers and one who's 12, are are looking at us and talking to us about severely limited aspirations and ambitions. Where just months ago they were all talking excitedly about driving lessons and maybe buying a first car, and getting a job, getting a part-time job, saving up a bit of money, going to university, having exciting careers, traveling the world. That's gone now. They talk about, my youngest comes up to us and says, do you think it would be okay if I went over to the park?
Yeah.
And by park, he means a patch of green,
right.
that we can see from our front window.
Right.
That's how narrow that's how foreshortened his horizons have become. And my daughter, talking to her friends who previously were talking about, some of them were talking about going to New York to study, in that way that teenagers, the biggest dreams in the world, anything's possible. They're going to go to Juilliard and study, whatever, music and all the rest of it. Or people were going to go to France and live and study there. And now they're just, worried about whether or not they'll have a good enough broadband connection to do their PSE class that they've got between 10 and 11. It's absolutely heartbreaking. I mean, as you have, I've done all these things. I've been to university. I've had great jobs. I've got a great job. I've travelled. I've been everywhere. And I've got that to draw upon. That's part of me, and I can lie and think about it. But if you're a kid who's just about to be on the springboard into life, and now you've already internalized the idea that you're not going anywhere, and even if you get a place at university, you're just going to be looking at a screen the way that you're looking at a screen to do your schoolwork. I mean, what kind of enervating toll, what kind of consequences is that going to have on the aspirations that we all depend upon? I mean, for a country to keep moving forward into the future, you need an inspired set of youngsters coming through who are excited and fizzing. When you're that age, you're absolutely fizzing with the enthusiasm about what lies ahead. And if you've already had all of that gone flat before you've even left school, then that is a dangerous inertia that has been established at the heart of the country. And the powers that be better start facing up to that. And it's not about being defeatist. They have to turn it around, because it's never too late. If you're still standing, you're still in the game. And somebody has got to find the means to boost morale, to inspire, and to admit that continually locking people down for months and years is going to break the country permanently. They have to have the confidence to say, we're not going to do this again. We did it for the best of reasons, but it didn't work. And we promise you, with our hands on the Bible and every other holy book, that we're not going to do that again.
Neil.
And that, whatever happens next, we're going to try something different.